Okay, I'm going to call the Alaska Board of Game working, or what do we call this?
Work session.
Work session. Work session to order. It's approximately 9:04 on January 25th, 2024. There are 7 board members present. Before proceeding farther, I'd like board members and department staff to introduce themselves and their staff. And we'll start with the board members. We'll start with Stosh Hoffman, Vice Chair.
Good morning, everyone. Stosh Hoffman from Bethel.
Al?
Good morning, everybody. Al Barrett from Fairbanks, and I have no staff.
And Jake?
Jake Fletcher, Talkeetna.
And James?
Hey, good morning, everyone. James Cooney from Eagle River.
Ruth?
Ruth Cusack from Chugiak.
And our newest board member, Dave.
Good morning, Board and public. My name is David Loring from Fairbanks.
And I'm Jerry Burnett. I'm the current chair. I'm from Juneau. And now we'll go on to the introductions for the department leads and staff. Expected to be a meeting. Ryan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and members of the public here, as well as listening online. My name is Ryan Scott. I'm the director of the Division of Wildlife Conservation. And with me today, I have Natalie Weber in the back, no stranger to board meetings. Also, Tony Gorn, the regional supervisor for Region 5. Very happy to be here in Kotzebue in the region. And also Mark Birch, the assistant director, who will be working on board stuff and potentially sitting here in the not too distant future. And in addition, we've got Phil Perry in the audience. He's our management coordinator for Region 5. And Patrick Jones is back there as well. He is our Bethel area biologist. Obviously, we'll have a whole bunch more people present tomorrow. I did get a note from the commissioner. He got hung up due to weather. Hopes to get here this evening. I still believe the Deputy Commissioner, Ben Mulligan, will be here this afternoon.
Thank you, Ryan. Dr. Witta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, good morning, everyone. Members of the public as well. It's great to be here in Kotzebue. It's been a while since I've been here, and it's fantastic to be back. Tomorrow, I'll have more staff with me and joining us, and I'll be introducing them at that time. Today, it's just me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Christy.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here, and I would like to introduce the amazing board support team that helps make this meeting all possible. Our newest member is Logan Holst. Logan's based out of Juneau and is a publication specialist for the Board of Game, and also covers roughly half of the Southeast Advisory Committees. We have Savannah Hollingworth, our regional coordinator from Bethel. And then we have Annie Bartholomew, who is now the publication specialist for the Board of Fisheries. And she covers the other half of the Southeast Advisory Committees.
Thank you. And Cheryl?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Cheryl Brooking, Department of Law out of Anchorage.
And George Pappas.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff here. George Pappas, Office of Subsistence Management, State Subsistence Liaison. It's great to be here. We'll have some different federal staff join us this week. We have the Selwyn National Wildlife Refuge Manager, Will Weesey, right here. He'll be making a presentation for the Regional Director, Sarah Barrio. She'll have some talking points. Additionally, this week we'll have I'll have assistance from the Office of Subsistence Management. I'll have a wildlife analyst here named Kendra Holman. I believe you may have met her at one meeting. Additionally, my supervisor, Amy Howard, who was the Assistant Regional Director for the Office of Subsistence Management, will be here later in the week. And at the end of the week, I believe most of the Fish and Wildlife leadership will be in town or have a retreat. So hopefully we'll get someone here maybe the last day of the meeting, if we possibly make it work with the weather, what have you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And we don't have the Alaska Wildlife Troopers at the table today. We will have them here tomorrow. We do have someone from Wildlife Troopers in the back of the room. And I didn't catch your name, so. Right, thank you. They'll be here tomorrow. And the Commissioner's office, I expect, will be here and be introduced tomorrow. So The purpose of this work session is to have an opportunity to hear various reports for the Department of Fish and Game and other agencies to address some administrative business. There will be no regulatory action conducted at this meeting. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, the board staff distributed and posted a meeting notice with the Alaska Online Public Notice System on the board's main website and meeting website as its designated posted place, and also distributed to its list of email recipients. I will not take the time to read it, but copies of the notice can be found at the back table in the workbook for those who are interested in the complete text. Copies of the tentative agenda for this meeting can be found in the back of the room on the table. The agenda may change throughout the meeting, but we will attempt to follow its order. The meeting material, including those submitted during the meeting, are also available from the Board of Game website at www.boardofgame.adfg.alaska.gov. Since this meeting is a non-regulatory meeting, members are not required to give their ethics disclosure statements. However, board members will be expected to provide disclosure statements tomorrow at the start of the regulatory meeting. The board is not taking oral public testimony during this meeting. However, the board is accepting written comment during this meeting. Anyone who would like to submit written comments to the board can do so by submitting them online at www.boardofgame.adfg.alaska.gov, by faxing it to 907-465-60. Support staff in the meeting room. Written comments are limited to 10 single-sided or 5 double-sided pages. All documents received at this board meeting will be assigned a record copy number, known as RC number, and will be distributed to the board members and posted on the meeting website. The original of all written materials submitted will be retained for permanent record of the board and will be posted online. Before we begin, please turn your cell phones off or to silent, and if anyone has trouble hearing the discussion, there are hearing assisting devices available from the board staff. At this time, we are ready to proceed with our agenda. The first item on the agenda is the election of officers. I'd like to open the floor to nominations for chair. Stosh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to nominate Jerry Burnett.
Any additional nominations? If not, we will vote the roll call on Stosh's nomination of me. Go ahead, Christie.
All right, Mr. Chairman, and forgive me, I had to step away for a moment, and I didn't hear what you just said, but that was a motion to nominate you, Mr. Chairman, as staying as Mr. Chairman. Okay.
That does not require a second, and
All
will
right.
you call the
So
roll on that?
Yes. Starting with Member Cooney.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Mr. Loring?
Yes.
Ms. Cusack?
Yes.
Mr. Fletcher?
Yes.
Chairman Burnett?
Yes.
And Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
That motion to have you continue serving as chair is approved unanimously.
Okay, our other officer is the vice chair. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? Al?
Yes, I would like to nominate Member Hoffman.
Thank you, Al. Are there any additional nominations for vice chair? Hearing none. Christie, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on the motion to have Mr. Hoffman serve as vice chair for the Board of Game, Mr. Loring,
Yes.
Ms. Cusack,
Yes.
Mr. Fletcher,
Yes.
Mr. Burnett,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Cooney,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
That motion carries 7-0.
Okay, so at this point, we don't have to take a break and move musical chairs or anything, because we're going to stay right where we are. But I really want to thank the board. This is my third year, I think, as serving as chair, and I appreciate the support and the support from the department. It's an incredible group of people I get to work with, and so thank you. And then we're going on to agenda item number 2, state and federal agency reports, and we're going to start with Ryan Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, my name is Ryan Scott. I'm the Director for the Division of Wildlife Conservation. I've got some brief comments, and then I'll have a few additional tomorrow once we get into the actual board meeting. Again, welcome to Kotzebue. It's great to see all of you again for our first meeting of the year. Congratulations on your chairmanship, Mr. Chairman. Start out first with a little bit of budget stuff. We're still riding the PR wave, if you will. Still anticipating quite a bit of money to come in for the next fiscal year. This year, the current year we're in now, we've got about $44 million associated with PR dollars that are coming in, and we'll be matching that with a variety of match funds, the largest of which is the Fish Game Fund, revenue that's generated by licenses and tags and things like that. For the FY25 budget request, we're going to be very close to where we are this year. In FY24, for operational dollars, it's about $67 million. And then for next year, we're requesting right at $69 million. Interestingly enough, we are anticipating somewhere around $41 million in PR revenues to come to the state. Just very quickly, those are excise taxes collected on firearms, ammunition, things like that, and then divvied up among all 50 states and some of the territories. Alaska, we get a hefty cut of that, not because of our population, but because of how big we are and our coastline and just the land area. So we will continue to enjoy that. It's important to note, though, it is coming down, and we knew, we anticipated that. We still have a lot of funding from PR dollars that we can use, but across the nation, it's down about 19%, and that's about $200 million for the country. I anticipate that it will continue to come down, but again, for the foreseeable future, we're going to have ample federal revenue or federal funding for much of our day-to-day S&I projects, research work, things like that. Last year, we did not ask for a CIP, a capital improvement project funding source. This year, based on what we anticipate we're going to receive, we're going to be seeking about a $9.3 million CIP. And again, that'll fund some larger projects, management and research projects, as well as some infrastructure stuff that we're working on and trying to be cognizant of the equipment and our employees, where they're at, and offices, bunkhouses, things like that. So again, looking pretty good down the road. A couple other things that, contribute to our funding. You're all aware that in December, the 24-25 drawing applications were closed in mid-December. We ended up with about $2.4 million out of those applications. It's a little bit of an increase over last year, just a couple $100,000, but all that money is allocated. We continue to put that forward to match federal funding. I haven't seen the end of the year license sales, big game tag sales yet. I'll have that information for you when we get to Fairbanks. But we were looking pretty good, so I anticipate that funding will be very strong as well. And I mention those things because that really is the meat of it for us, right? The application fees, the big game tag fees, and the hunting and trapping licenses, excuse me. A couple other things, you're aware of the raffle and auction program we have through the department. Last year for the McNeil Bear Viewing and the Super 7 raffle, we exceeded all revenue prior to that. The McNeil permits brought in $168,000. The Super 7 raffle brought in $466,000. And again, specifically the Super 7 goes right back into the Fish Game Fund where we can match that PR dollars. It's kind of nice, frankly, that going down a little bit. It's hard to match it all. And I think we have a good, solid plan going forward for the next 3, 4, 5 years. But weather takes us out of the game sometimes. various things come up and we can't get some of the work done. But it's, so we're in a good place now, but I'm okay that we're not seeing like $50 million coming in, something like that at this point. Staffing-wise, we're authorized 281 positions as of yesterday. We had 31 vacancies, but about half of those are in active recruitment. We're still struggling, like many of the state agencies, to get strong applicant pools. However, some things have been pretty positive recently, and I'll have a little bit more for you on that in Fairbanks, but we've had good success recently hiring. There's a slew of brand-new assistant ABs, which is awesome. They'll be up and coming, they're operational, going to be on the ground, and hopefully they'll be ready to replace many of the other folks that'll be retiring in the coming years. There have been some pretty big changes, though, among our staff. Dr. Wida, next to me, left our Anoka shop and is now leading the subsistence section. We're sorry to see her go, but super happy she's still in the department, working very closely. Molly McCarthy, our partner program coordinator, left state service and went to work for an NGO. Happy for her. Sorry to lose her. She's outstanding at working on the auction and raffle program. We wish her well, and frankly, we talk to her all the time, and she's helping us out with a lot of things. We recently hired for that position. I'm not quite at a place where I can put it out yet, but we have a selected candidate, and they have accepted, so that'll be coming out pretty quickly. Retirement-wise, Kristen Romanoff, our assistant director that oversees education, outreach, hunter information and training, public records, things like that. She has announced her retirement as of April 30th. So that's another, that's going to be a big loss. Of course, we wish Kristen well. We're going to miss her. That recruitment should be on the street any day. We're ready to go, and hopefully we'll get that out fairly quickly. Tracy Gotthard, who oversees our Threatened and Endangered and Diversity program. She is going to be retiring from the state and taking a position with the federal government. I believe it's Fish and Wildlife Service, and I believe that's coming up mid-February. So we'll be recruiting for that. We also have a recruitment out for Amy's position. That's running for another couple weeks, I believe. The assistant director position will be coming out pretty quick. We have a vacancy in the deputy director position, and we're recruiting for that as well. So if you're not quite catching the theme, there's a lot of recruitments going on, and that's just stuff in like our office, the headquarters office, but throughout the state, in the regions and area offices and other statewide programs, there is a lot of activity to hire people, and that's really good to see. I'm very happy about that. Let's see, a couple other things I want to mention. Our Access Defense and Anoka folks continue to work on state and federal issues that are coming up. Various plans are being worked on and coordinated through both of those groups. The Anoka team specifically is working with the Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service on rulemaking and policy projects. There's some things going on there that, we've got to stay involved and make sure that the state is represented and the interests are known, and we continue to work for Alaskans. Marine Mammal Program has actually got some pretty pointed work going on right now, one of which is there's interest in harbor porpoise in southeast Alaska, which could have some impacts as far as if we end up separating them out to various stocks, which has been proposed by the National Marine Fisheries Service. That could impact some fisheries, specifically like gillnet fisheries. So our marine mammal folks are heavily involved in that and have an extensive project plan starting this summer to determine are there actually individual stocks or are they all one harbor porpoise, if you will. A couple miscellaneous things real quick. We had another record year for orphan placements. I know it doesn't rise real high to the list of wildlife topics when people think about it, but it can get it can get pretty sporty when a set of bear cubs shows up or moose calves or whatever, and people get interested in what's going on with them. We have a great permitting program that Mr. Birch runs with the help of Natalie and Stephanie Bogle out of Juneau. They did a really good job of getting folks out, getting those animals parsed out for us. I think I'll wrap it up with, I just want to say thank you to Cheryl. She's going to provide her legal briefing for sure, but this has been a year of lawsuits, and we have been very busy with that. Cheryl and her team have just done an outstanding job for not only the department. I don't want to speak for the board, but she did a good job for you guys too. And very thankful for all the help, and always willing to answer the phone, even if it's something minor, but very helpful. So I wanted to reach out and say thank you. And I think that's it for today. We'll have more tomorrow, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members for Ryan? I think we'll ask questions tomorrow. Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm Amy Wida, Head of Subsistence for the department. Again, it's great to be here in Kotzebue with everyone this morning. I will provide a brief update today with a little bit more information tomorrow as well for the public's benefit. I'm excited to be in my new role, working with a great team at Subsistence, and very happy I'm able to continue working closely with Ryan, Division of Wildlife Conservation staff, and everyone in the department across the divisions and the Department of Law. Cheryl and I worked quite closely when I was in the ANILCA program as well, so I'm looking forward to that. This morning I'll start with staffing. Subsistence has staff in offices in Anchorage, Douglas, and Fairbanks. We have 52 positions in total, 41 of which are currently filled. 42 of those are permanent staff and 10 are non-permanent staff. I'll also echo what Ryan said. We are also experiencing recruitment issues, just like so many others are. For research staff, candidate pools tend to be small and qualifications aren't typically robust these days, so that's unfortunate. Our information management team, however, is currently experiencing a relatively stable period for staffing, so that's on our data processing side of things, so that's good. We currently have 48 funded research projects across the state. That's in all of our regions, both northern, southern, and statewide. We are continuing to put an emphasis on safety for staff. We're focused on improving that field safety policies for everyone. We continue with staff training, including things like partnering with other divisions to make that affordable and feasible. We're purchasing safety equipment as necessary and training on that safety equipment, and empowering staff to make safety a priority for them when they're out in the field and in other areas, which is desperately important. We continue to focus on training in boating safety, wilderness first aid, as well as other areas beyond safety, such as financial training and administrative training for our admin staff. I'd like to highlight a couple of accomplishments of staff this past year. Dr. Liliana Naves, who has been with Subsistence for over 15 years in our statewide program, was awarded the 2023 ISLEB Award for Outstanding Contributions to Bird Conservation in Alaska. This is a really great honor for her. That is presented each year at the Alaska Bird Conference, and that's been being done since 1994. Caroline Brown, our statewide research director, and Jesse Coleman, a lead subsistence resource specialist in our Fairbanks office, were both competitively selected to participate in this year's departmental leadership program, and I'm very excited to see them participating in that and excited to see what they do with that and where that leads them. Next, I'll talk a little bit about our technical papers that we produce, as well as our research in this area, and a little bit of general information. I'm sure the board is very familiar with our technical papers. This is our primary way for reporting our research findings out to other folks. We also have special publications for other items such as customary and traditional use determinations and other board-related information. We first started publishing in 1982. We have 474 technical papers in total and 139 special papers. About 58 of those technical papers are related to the Western Arctic region for this board meeting over history, and about 28 special publications. So for research in the northern region, we've completed 196 comprehensive surveys since 1964. So that's just a total overview of what we've done. That includes interior, Western Arctic, and Arctic areas. Since the board last met for this region, a comprehensive subsistence survey in Kiana was conducted. We have community approval to conduct additional comprehensive subsistence surveys in Wainwright and Kivalina. We've received funding from the National Park Service for comprehensive surveys in 3 Upper Kobuk River communities, and we'll be reaching out to communities for this opportunity. The communities involved that we'll be reaching out to are Ambler, Shungnak, and Kobuk. We also completed large land mammal surveys that included a focus on Western Arctic caribou herd in 8 communities, including Gullivan, White Mountain, Selawik, Shungnak, Shishmaref, Deering, Noatak, and Kobuk. The board will also be hearing detailed results from those surveys and that data that was collected during this board meeting, during our oral reports, and Helen Cold will be providing that information for subsistence. And lastly, for Northern Region topics relevant to this meeting, we have also requested funding for a comprehensive survey and plan to explore the subsistence use and harvest patterns for Nome residents in 2025 if we are to receive funding for that. Currently, there is a request for that. To look at subsistence broadly, our southern region has completed 8 comprehensive surveys, or they're underway right now, for this winter and spring, and they're also conducting a traditional ecological knowledge study of moose in the Port Graham area, so that's down south. Our information management team group has also been modernizing our data processing to meet departmental developments and best practices for data processing, so we're trying to get that to the best form as we can at this point, and are working on that continuously. In that effort, we have a new version of our Community Subsistence Information System, or our CSIS, that folks may be familiar with. The new system will provide more interactive and visual depictions of subsistence information across the state. It's being purposefully designed to accommodate spatial information collected by the division, and the system is currently available for use as a public review draft while we work to format and annotate data for the new system. And that's all I have for today. I'll have a little bit more tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weta. Any questions from board members? Okay, Christy, did you have a report for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to touch on the board support program for the board members and let you know about our staffing and some of the AC activity. This meeting cycle has been a little more of a challenge with vacancy. Our program has 11 employees, 6 that are year-round, and then we have 5 seasonal regional coordinators. We had 4 employees move on to other positions or other things, and so that's a high vacancy rate for us. In the spring, we learned our regional coordinator in Dillingham was going to take off for personal reasons, and so we went through that recruitment process and grateful to have a new regional coordinator start the season with us in September, and so she's come up to speed and doing very well with the advisory committees in that region, and then also getting quite a share of working the board meetings to come up to speed with those duties, working the board meetings. And so then in the summer, we had turnover with our administrative assistant position, but by the start of the meeting cycle, we had someone on board up to speed to help book the board members' travels and whatnot, and she does an amazing amount of work for the board support program. About November, late November, we had a turnover in our regional coordinator position for the Arctic region. And so that is why we would normally have a regional coordinator here at this meeting for Arctic, but that position's currently vacant. We have a recruitment out, and hoping to be able to fill that before the end of the meeting cycle. And then, going back to the fall, at the start of the meeting cycle, that we then had turnover with our publication specialist position for the Board of Fisheries, who took a different position that was an advancement for him. So it was a challenge to, at the start of the cycle, recruiting and then training for that position, because we're, of course, getting so busy with the board meetings and whatnot. So pleased we have Logan on board, and Logan's had the opportunity to attend Board of Fish meetings for training, and then this is Logan's first Board of Game meeting. And then, of course, with the virtual board meetings, work sessions, Logan's been involved with that, but it's a big learning curve for that position, because we do things pretty uniquely, and there's a lot of different pieces that are involved with this. So I just wanted to touch base on our staffing, and then I also like to just give you an idea of the activity for the advisory committees through the meeting cycle and to date. So we have 84 advisory committees around the state, although not all of them are active. And then we have 5 regions with the seasonal regional coordinator supporting those, but then we also have Southeast with the publication specialist supporting those ACs. So to date, I'd say maybe give or take 5 advisory committee meetings, but we have about 104 meetings total, which just is amazing to me. That's a huge amount of meetings that our staff have to cover, coordinate. We have a lot of Zoom meetings, so there's behind the scenes where, most of these meetings, a lot of these meetings are in the evening, so board support staff are there to initiate those meetings and be available. Just to break it down per region, in the Arctic region, that regional coordinator covers 9 advisory committees. We've 4 of those ACs have had meetings. The other 5 have not been able to meet this year. In the interior region, that person covers 16 advisory committees. 26 have had meetings, and I know there's 8 more meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks. South Central, that person covers 18 advisory committees. To date, 38 meetings, 17 subcommittee meetings for a total of 55. That's incredible to me. And a lot of those are the single community ACs where, like Anchorage, Matt Valley might meet twice monthly. They're a little more hands-off with regards to the support during the meetings by board support section, although the area biologists are there to help walk them through proposals and whatnot. But still, yeah, that's a big number of meetings. And then Board of Fisheries is covering the Upper Cook Inlet finfish cycle, so that's why we see a big spike, a large number of meetings for the South Central region. Going to the Western region, which is really a challenging region because this is where the committees consist of, their membership consists of many different communities that we're trying to bring together. So Savannah covers 6 advisory committees, and 5 of those have held meetings so far. And I just want to also mention for Savannah, too, a big challenge out in that region is the weather. There have been plenty of times where she's trying to bring these folks in from their villages to Bethel to have an advisory committee meeting, only to have delays and cancellations because of the weather. So she works hard to get those ACs together. Southeast, it's a little lighter this year because neither the Board of Fish nor the Board of Game are covering Southeast topics, although Board of Fisheries will be, they do have a call for proposals open for Southeast finfish, which they'll be addressing next year. So we'll see here in the next couple of months, probably a lot of activity for Southeast ACs because they'll be wanting to develop proposals for the Board of Fisheries. So it's a lighter load there so far for Southeast. They have 23 total ACs. A good handful of those are not active. As I mentioned earlier, Logan and Annie split up those ACs serving as the regional coordinators. We've had about about 10 total AC meetings so far for that region. And Mr. Chairman, I think that's about all I wanted to cover for our program. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions from board members? I don't have a question, but I do want to comment that, based on the information that's been given by the department and my other knowledge, I have to comment that our Department of Fish and Game, it's one of the largest and most complex and most public-facing departments in state government. And the amount of work they do it's incredible, and we really need to appreciate what's done there. So thank you all for that. Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So this might take a few minutes. I'm going to start with my litigation update. Starting with the federal court, Alaska Wildlife Alliance versus Holland, the AWA challenged the 2020 National Park Service rule that amended the 215 rules that previously were challenged by the state and the Safari Club and APHA. I won't go back into that. There were some other interveners. The National Park Service did not participate in briefing or oral argument to defend the 2020 rule. There was a change of administration after the rules were adopted. The Federal District Court remanded the rule without vacating it. All parties appealed to the Ninth Circuit. A proposed rule was published by the Park Service last January to reimpose the 2015 restrictions that the state objects to. The Ninth Circuit appeal is now stayed pending the new rulemaking. The Alaska versus the Federal Subsistence Board, I've reported on this one before. This was in August 2020, this all started where the state challenged actions taken by the Federal Subsistence Board. So just jumping to the most recent stuff, the state challenged the Federal Subsistence Board's delegation of authority to local land managers to open emergency hunts and to delegate hunt administration outside of a federal agency, neither of which was authorized in ANILCA by Congress. In December 2021, the Alaska Federal District Court issued a decision declining to address some of those states' claims and held that the Federal Subsistence Board is not required to comply with open meetings laws. And the court upheld the 2-year moose and caribou closure on federal lands in units 13A and 13B. The state appealed. The Ninth Circuit issued a decision in March 2023 vacating the district court's decision regarding the Unit 13 closure. So that decision has no legal precedential value. And the Ninth Circuit remanded the case to the district court to address the state's claim that the Federal Subsistence Board is not authorized to open seasons and the delegation outside of a federal agency. On remand, the district court upheld the Federal Subsistence Board's actions in opening an emergency moose and deer hunt near Cake during COVID. The state appealed earlier this month. So we're back in the Ninth Circuit again. United States versus Alaska. This was a 2022 case. The United States sued the state of Alaska, Fish and Game, and the commissioner in his official capacity, seeking a declaratory judgment that Alaska's emergency orders that open harvest on the Kuskokwim River within the refuge during a federal closure are invalid and void. The U.S. further sought an injunction to prevent Alaska from issuing emergency orders or from taking similar actions in contravention of federal orders addressing ANILCA Title VIII and applicable regulations. The district judge denied the federal motion for a temporary restraining order, but ultimately granted the request for a preliminary injunction while the case is litigated on the merits, so that injunction is still in place. Several groups have intervened, and that litigation is ongoing. Alaska Wildlife Alliance versus U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In 2022, Alaska moved to intervene on behalf of the federal defendants, in this case, in a challenge to an incidental take regulation that allows non-lethal incidental take of polar bears. This is basically harassment, causes bears to change their behavior for oil and gas activities in the southern Beaufort Sea region. The Fish and Wildlife Service issued a 5-year regulation, but they've been doing so since 1992, finding that the non-lethal incidental take would be in small numbers and have negligible impact, and therefore would be allowed under the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammals Protection Act. The judge agreed with that. AWA appealed, and that appeal is ongoing. I've got some fish cases in here along with the game cases because I thought folks might be interested in that. Wild Fish Conservancy versus Tom. In March 2020, the Wild Fish Conservancy sued NMFS, alleging that the salmon fishery in federal waters in southeast Alaska violated the Endangered Species Act. And they specifically argued that the ESA biological opinion prepared by the feds related to the southern resident killer whales was flawed, and that any take of their food, which is Chinook salmon, was unlawful. Alaska intervened and participated in cross motions for summary judgment. The court granted the plaintiff summary judgment, finding that NMFS violated the ESA by failing to include solid guarantees that future mitigation to offset the negative impacts on endangered species would occur, and that the BIOP, the biological opinion, violates the ESA by failing to evaluate whether the prey increase program will jeopardize the endangered Chinook salmon in western Washington. The district court effectively enjoined the southeast Alaska salmon troll fishery, but the decision was to stay that fishery was put on hold by the Ninth Circuit while the appeal proceeds. So fishing was allowed to continue. And you might have seen this one on the news. This was a big deal. This is shutting down Alaska fisheries for what's going on in Washington. United Cook Inlet Drift Association versus NMFS. In 2021, NMFS published the Alaska Salmon FMP Amendment 14 final rule that closed the federal waters of Cook Inlet to commercial salmon fishing. UCEDA sued NMFS, challenging the validity of Amendment 14. The district court agreed and found Amendment 14 to be invalid and ordered a new salmon FMP covering Cook Inlet EEZ to be in place by May 2024. A new FMP amendment was published for comment and is on track to be in regulation by May 1st. Alaska and North Slope Borough versus NMFS. In November 2022, the state filed a complaint challenging NMFS' negative 90-day finding regarding a petition to delist the Arctic ring seal. The state is seeking remand, directing NMFS to reconsider the negative finding in light of updated information collected since the species was listed. That litigation is ongoing. And as a reminder, the seals were listed not because of any decline, but because of a potential decline decades into the future based on models and climate change, loss of sea ice. So the models that are predicting that loss of sea ice. Alaska versus NMFS. In February 2023, the state filed a complaint challenging NMFS' designation of critical habitat for the Arctic subspecies of ringed seal and the Beringia distinct population segment of the Pacific bearded seal. The state's seeking an order holding these critical habitat designations unlawful because NMFS failed to limit critical habitat areas to only those necessary for recovery of the species, and because NMFS failed to properly consider the economic impacts of the designations, and that litigation is ongoing. In state court, Castle versus Alaska Board of Game. Robert Castle filed a complaint in 2019 objecting to a regulation that allocates brown bear drawing permits between residents and non-residents in Unit 8. The state prevailed, Castle appealed. Oral argument will be next month in February. Joel Bennett and the Alaska Wildlife Alliance versus Vincent Lang. They filed a complaint in 2020 objecting to the 2020 estimate of the wolf population in Unit 2 and seeking closure of wolf hunting and trapping in Unit 2 on state lands only for the 2020-2021 season. Their request for a preliminary injunction was denied. The state's motion for dismissal and summary judgment were denied. A week-long trial was held in April 2022. The state prevailed. Plaintiffs appealed, and oral argument will be held in February, in Juneau. West versus State of Alaska. Ron West sued the state again. He filed a complaint in 2021 alleging that the definition of sustained yield in the statute 1605-255 is unconstitutional. The state's motion to dismiss was denied. The state ultimately prevailed on summary judgment, however. The court found that the legislature has the authority to define sustained yield and that the definition is valid. West appealed. Oral argument was held in December, and we await a decision. Cook Inlet Fishermen's Fund versus Fish and Game. A group of commercial salmon fishermen sued Fish and Game, Board of Fisheries, and the commissioner, alleging that the management of Cook Inlet salmon fisheries is illegal and that the regulations adopted by the board are invalid, and that Fish and Game court denied their motion seeking a temporary restraining order. The state's motion to dismiss was largely granted, and cross motions for judgment have been filed on the remaining issue. Cook Inlet Keeper versus Vincent Lang. Cook Inlet Keeper, Kachemak Bay Conservation Society, and some others sued the commissioner and the Department of Fish and Game, challenging the repeal of the prohibition on personal watercraft in Kachemak Bay and Fox River Flats critical habitat areas. Plaintiffs allege that defendants violated the APA, acted without statutory authority, and violated Article 8 of the Constitution. The court found that the commissioner does not have the constitutional claims outright, and the tribe abandoned its claims against the board. The ultimate conclusion was favorable to the state, though the court found there was no prevailing party and ordered both sides to bear their own fees and costs. The tribe appealed the issues that they lost to the Alaska Supreme Court. In December, the Alaska Supreme Court ruled completely in the state's favor. Ahtna versus Vincent Lang. A committee of Ahtna Incorporated initially sued the state, and then they amended their complaint so that it would include the committee and Ahtna Inc. and two Ahtna shareholders as plaintiffs. And then the committee was ultimately dismissed from this case for not being a valid party in interest. Anyway, they sought declaratory relief that closing subsistence caribou hunts when the harvest quota was reached, while allowing a drawing permit hunt to remain open because that quota was not reached in Game Management Unit 13, does not provide a reasonable opportunity for subsistence hunters. The court denied a preliminary injunction in September 2022. Plaintiffs filed the amended complaint actually after that preliminary injunction was denied. And that added new defendants, changed the claims made, et cetera. The state moved to dismiss, and plaintiffs filed a motion for partial summary judgment. The court later asked the parties to brief whether the issues are moot. The parties have done that, and we await a decision. Let's see. Bittner versus state. In 2023, Michelle Bittner challenged the intensive management program to aid in recovery of the Mulchatna caribou herd and alleged the state improperly allowed overhunting of the Mulchatna caribou herd and the Western Arctic caribou herd. The Superior Court granted the state's motion to dismiss for lack of standing and because she's not an interested party, interested person under the APA to challenge regulations. Fees to the state as the prevailing party. Bittner recently appealed. Her opening brief is due February 20. We're getting there. Alaska Wildlife Alliance versus state. In 2023, the Alaska Wildlife Alliance challenged the Board of Games' approval of the intensive management program to aid in recovery of the Mulchatna caribou herd. The Superior And now the administrative record is being prepared. Taylor versus State. In 2023, Neal and Taylor challenged the Board of Games' adoption of the intensive management regulation last year for moose in Unit 15C. The state moved to dismiss. Taylor recently moved for summary judgment. Litigation is ongoing. And that's the end of my report. And if you have any questions, I will not answer them publicly. Thank you.
Any questions from board members for Cheryl that she can answer? Al?
Yeah, thank you. That was a lot of work. How is the budget? Are you guys meeting? You're getting funded for this, that you can continue to do work like this, or is that needing an increase, or?
Most of the work that we do in litigation is funded by the Department of Fish and Game through RSA agreements. I'm sorry, I should have got some water before I started talking so much. But as I understand it, there's hasn't been too much of a change in the Department of Law budget. The Department of Law has lost a lot of staff over the past 8 years. But at least the natural resources section at this time is fully staffed for the first time in a long time. So I'm very pleased to be able to say that.
Right, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Any additional questions for Cheryl? If not, thank you. And we're all wondering what you do in the afternoons, but good.
Mr. Chair, I do have one more brief report. This one's going to be a lot shorter. I just wanted to report on some of the game bills that I'm monitoring that are in the state legislature right now. We're in the second session of the 2-year legislative session. So some of these are carryovers from last year. HB 243 would reduce the bison draw permit application fee from $10 to $5. HB 263 would allow a person to disable a trap or snare if that person was lawfully using a public trail, park, campsite, or other facility, and if the person reasonably believed that disabling this trap or snare was necessary to protect public welfare or private property. HB 272 would authorize the Board of Game to establish big game hunting seasons for persons with physical disabilities. SB 168 would provide compensation for game wrongfully seized based on the pounds of meat taken at the price of beef sold in the area, and that game defined in the bill as bison, caribou, deer, elk, goat, moose, sheep, and muskox. HB 201 and companion SB 171 would change the residency requirement for resident hunting, fishing, and trapping to require a person to be in the state continuously for 12 months prior and in line with the PFD requirements for any absences from the state. HB 8 would have regulated e-bikes as bicycles that passed last year but was vetoed by the governor. HB 12 would authorize municipalities to regulate trapping. HB 20 would allow a member of the Board of Fisheries and Board of Game to participate in discussions and deliberations after disclosing a conflict of interest, but the member would not be able to vote on the matter. HB 64 and its companion SB 10 would authorize resident trapping licenses for certain active military members and PIDs for disabled veterans. HB 120 and its companion SB 28 would allow non-resident post-secondary students studying in Alaska to buy a hunting, fishing, or trapping license at the resident fee. And HB 125 would, the end of my report, Mr. Chair.
Cheryl, is there also an executive order that would, any executive orders that the governor has introduced that would affect hunting, fishing, or the department?
I've heard that there is one out there. You might want to discuss that one. That one has not been assigned to me to watch.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not have the executive order number. However, there is one for 5 AAC 92.029, which we refer to as a clean list. and the authority over the clean list is being proposed to be moved from the Board of Game to the Commissioner. And it just recently was introduced. However, we'll have more on that probably in the next couple months anyway. However, it is going to potentially impact your discussion today when we start thinking about the board cycle next year, because those regulations are part of the statewide package.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Al?
I think that executive order is Executive Order 124.
Thank you. And that, Cheryl, you concluded your report. So that's all of the state agency reports, I believe. And so if there's no other state agency reports, federal agency reports, George.
Mr. Chair, George Pappas, OSM. I have a minor report I'd like to present tomorrow, if you don't mind, more geared towards the public, more geared towards this meeting.
Right.
But we do have Will, the refuge manager, local refuge manager for Selwick, would like to give you an update. He's representing Leadership for Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska.
Thank you. Please come to the table and state your name for the record.
Uvalotok, good morning. Will Louisi with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Thank you to the board for the invitation. The Leadership Fish and Wildlife Service really appreciates the invitation and the work that you do. Sarah Boreal was unable to make it today, our regional director, or this weekend, but we may see her beginning of next week. I'm the manager of Selwick National Wildlife Refuge, which is headquartered here in Kotzebue, or Kikiktagrut, as it's known to the indigenous Inupiat, who have lived here for thousands of years and continue to thrive here and steward the lands and waters here. Selwick Refuge, we're here for 4 purposes designated right in ANILCA: treaty obligations, ensuring water quality and quantity, making sure that we provide continued subsistence opportunity, and also conserving fish and wildlife and their habitats. Specifically mentioned there for Selwick Refuge are salmon, sheefish, migratory birds, and the western Arctic caribou herd, including participating in coordinated studies of the herd and management of the herd. So how do we meet those purposes? We work closely with our partners. We've got really good, strong working relationships with Department of Fish and Game and National Park Service, and locally with tribes and other partners here in the region. Yeah, I'd say we're really, really fortunate to have those good partnerships, and we communicate really well with the Department of Fish and Game and National Park Service. They do amazing work here, and it's what allows us to meet our purposes. We also work closely with our agency partners in supporting the Western Arctic Caribou Herd Working Group, and that working group made up of people from the region here, people from the North Slope, Seward Peninsula, and representatives from the guiding industry, Fairbanks and Anchorage, reindeer herd reservation organizations. And as agencies, we support that group, and we support their management plan and their efforts to lead in management of the herd. So with that, I will provide, I'll be here today and throughout the week. I have submitted comments on behalf of Selwick Refuge on some of the Western Arctic Caribou herd proposals that will be discussed this week. And I'll be here to take any questions on behalf of the refuge, and anything I can answer there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from board members before? Go ahead. Ryan has a question first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question. I just wanted to say thank you for being here, and certainly appreciate the work that we're able to do with you and the support that the refuge has for the department. And boy, it's nice to see those relationships continue and all the great stuff that happens between the two agencies. Thank you.
Okay, and Dave Loring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for being here also. And You might not know this answer, maybe somebody else does. Is there a place I can look online or a list of who the current members of the working group are, Western Arctic Caribou Working Group, the current roster? I haven't seen one recently. I just wonder who the current group is now. Thank you.
Through Chair, yeah, there is a website for the Western Arctic Caribou Herd Working Group. I don't recall what it is offhand. And we do try and keep it as up-to-date as possible. I'm not sure if it's up-to-date as of the last meeting as the membership, but that website's the best place to look.
Thank you very much.
Al?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that you were complying or working with what you have as treaty obligations. I'm not familiar with treaty obligations you have in the Selawik Refuge.
Sure, we don't, that's one of our ANILCA purposes. But I'd say it's not one that we have any specific treaties to Selawik Refuge. But the ANILCA designated refuges in the state have that as a purpose to uphold treaty obligations.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Jake?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Wynn, thanks a whole bunch for being here today. My question's a little bit on a different topic. I'm a guide, and, occasionally we get a letter notifying the National Wildlife Refuge Systems, has a prospectus opportunity for big game guiding that's remained, unclaimed, or not unclaimed, but unapplied for and unawarded. Do you have, and I know that Selawik's on that, do you have any reason or your thoughts as to, why these certain refuges, some of those, stay open, especially with all the competition of, for big game guiding on state land?
I can only speak to Selawik Refuge, and you're correct. Currently, we don't have a guide permit awarded for the Selawik Refuge guide use area. It's been, we haven't had one awarded for about the last 12 months. But not being a guide, I can't exactly speak to why guides haven't applied. It's a remote location. Certainly, guides want to put on good hunts, as you know, and with changing wildlife populations, that can be difficult. We haven't seen caribou migration through Selawik Refuge early in the year like we saw historically. So during that time period when guided hunts usually take place, caribou aren't on Selawik Refuge. So it would be, if I was in your shoes, it would be difficult for me to book those hunts. Probably a big part of the reason people aren't applying.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. No other questions. Thanks again for your report, and thanks for being here this week. George, did you have anything else today?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, I think that includes our agency and federal reports. This time we go on to our committee reports and assignments. And the first one on here is the Big Game Commercial Services Board, Dave. But before we do that, I want to take like a 2 or 3 minute break so everybody, because I know coffee's done. Some people have gotten up and got it, but maybe someone else needs to. So let's just take like a 5 minute break and give people a chance. Thanks. Going to call the work session back to order. It's 10:30 a.m. And we're going to start off with the report on the Big Game Commercial Services Board from Member Loring.
Thank you, Chairman Burnett. My name is David Loring, and I've been assigned as the Board of Game representative to the Big Game Commercial Services Board. I attended their meeting December 4th, 5th, and 6th in Anchorage that they just recently had as a board member on that board. And basically, that meeting just revolved talking about goals that they wanted to have done and some of the things that are currently happening with their board as far as being sunsetted. I'll get into that just a second here. They also worked on approving or agreeing with issues dealing with guides that had gotten in trouble with hearing officer decisions. They accepted most of them. There's one they didn't accept that, of course, that was all in executive session because it dealt with personnel, but so that was one of the other major parts of that board. Took quite a bit of public testimony from guides that were present. They have a little different system than we have. They take testimony every day, a couple different times a day from the members, but there's a lot smaller pool of testifiers in that particular board setting. And at the very end of the meeting, they came up with a set of goals that they are looking for to happen. A couple of them are very important to them, and the rest of them are important, but in no particular order as far as importance goes. The main thing they're dealing with is their board sunsets this spring, and they do have a current bill in front of the legislature. It's Senate Bill 182. It has been introduced, and it's going to request that the board be reinstated, getting out of the sunset situation until June 30th of 2032. So it'll be a pretty big chunk of time. They recently had a legislative audit that went real well for them. They didn't find any issues. The audit group didn't find any issues with the board that were concerning. The audit group and the board did recognize that they need to have their executive assistant, similar to what Christy does here, full-time assigned to their board. Right now, that person is splitting his time between the Marine Pilots Board and the Big Game Commercial Services Board. So the amount of time he has to spend for each board is significantly reduced because he's sharing time. The audit did suggest that the Big Game Commercial Board get a full-time executive assistant. That was supposed to be part of the sunset bill, but it didn't get put in, so they're looking for a sponsor to do that. So that's the most important thing they have on their agenda, getting that done. Looks like it's in the process. The second most important thing is coming up and finishing up a guide concession program, and that's actively being worked on right now by members of the board. Of course, everybody knows what most of those issues are. It's a guide concession program on state land and not in the federal system, but on state land. Areas like 19C, for instance, and also 20A, are pieces of state land that have quite a bit of guiding activity on those that have brought up some issues in the past and currently with the guiding industry. They also want to add a couple more, and they're not sure how to do this, but they want to add a couple more guides to the board because there's quite a bit of work involved in the guiding process of the board that additional guides with guide knowledge can do. Right now, the board is made up of 2 guides, a representative of the marine transporters, of the air transporters, private landholders, and a couple members of the general public, and then a Board of Game person, which is myself. So they want to try to get additional guides on that board to deal with some of the work that they have coming up. They also want to try to get a bill passed or some legislation passed to make transporters as a natural person. Currently, just a license is tied to the business. So if they take a transporter license away for a violation, that license goes away, but the individual that's running that can just come up with a different business name, go right back into business again. So they want to try to tie that license to a natural person. They also want to work on providing for survivorship and emergencies in statute. What happens if a guy dies unexpectedly, or there's an emergency comes up in his life and he has clients booked and he's got an operation going, and how is that then taken care of? They want to see some kind of direction in statute or regulation on how that's taken care of. They also want to have some kind of oversight on booking agents and hunt planners. It's a pretty big deal in the guiding industry and in hunting with non-residents in Alaska, but there's no oversight at all on how those groups operate. They'd like to see a shortened timeline for the time that a regulation is approved by the board until it's actually adopted. And they kept referring to the Board of Game that we can adopt a regulation that's passed in March and have it effective July 1st. In their particular situation, sometimes it takes up to a year to get that regulation actually adopted and in place. They also want to look at having marine transporters and air transporters as two different license classifications. Right now, they're lumped into one group, and they want to see if they can't break those separate. They're two completely separate groups in how they operate. A marine transporter might be somebody that has a boat, a liveaboard boat, say in Southeast or Kodiak, or Prince William Sound, that's running, bear hunters or deer hunters, that type of thing, versus, say, an air transporter that just is a 135 on-demand operator, or a transporter that just takes a hunter out, drops them off, and then leaves again. So there's quite a bit of difference in types of operations. They want to see that separated out. And they're really big on continuing education for the guides, to keep the guides up on regulations, on issues, on game populations, just continuing in-house education in the guiding industry. So like I said, the first two, the Sunset Bill and the guide concessions, are their big two. After that, they have these other goals that they're looking towards working on. We have a very active chairman. Jason Bunch is putting a lot of time and effort into trying to get the board and the whole process moving and keeping going. Very dedicated individual, and other members of the board are also so. For me, it was an easy transition. I did have quite a big experience working with the Big Game Commercial Board in the past, so my learning curve was pretty shallow. And that helped quite a bit for my particular case. So I was able to actually participate quite a bit in their discussions and comments. And that's about all I have. Is there any questions from anybody?
Any questions from board members? And Dave, I wanted a clarification on wanting more guides on the board. That could be a concern for the public if you think about that, but perhaps you could explain what their disciplinary process is that requires there to be, why they want more guides on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what happens is there's a violation reported to the troopers or to whoever, and if it's a criminal violation, troopers handle it. If it's a civil violation, their statute, their regulations are criminal and also on the civil side. And they have an investigator that works full-time with the Big Game Services Board. So let's just say they promised me T-bone steaks and I got Hershey bars instead, okay, or got MREs. And so that would be an ethics, or that'd be a civil side of the thing. So that would go to the investigator that worked for the guide board, where if the guide and his client shot a sublegal sheep, that would go to the troopers to investigate. And so what happens then is that once the criminal case is adjudicated, then it goes over to the Big Game Commercial Services Board investigator, and then he presents that to the board, and there's a trigger mechanism in their process that if there'll be like a suspension of a license or revocation of a license for a number of days or a number of months based on the dollar value of a violation. And let's say the judge has a $5,000 fine, well, that would then trigger a certain suspension process. And so there's quite a bit of stuff going on within or behind the scenes with all this stuff as far as how the violations are processed, either the criminal side or the civil side. And then, so there's needs to be a lot of knowledge, institutional knowledge from the guides on how the operations work and what's going on. And, Jay can probably relate to this pretty well since he's active at it. But they just feel that they would like to have additional expertise on the board to handle not only the violation process, but also working with the regulations and working with the user groups and trying to make everything come together. If that answers your question, kind of a roundabout way.
Yeah, thanks. So any other questions for Dave on that board? If not, first question I have is, Dave, you want to continue on the board?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
If the
Is there anyone
Board
else
again
who
would-
was interested in continue, being on that board or qualified to be on that board? Because it has to be someone who's not a guide and doesn't have a license. So if not, is there any objection to Dave continuing to serve on that board? If no objection, then you will continue to be our
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
board. Wood Bison Planning Reintroduction Working Group.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a very busy year. I guess I'll start with Lower Onoco. Somewhat disappointing news there. We've lost a lot of bison, mainly due to weather, snow conditions on the range out there. We started out in 2015 with about 130 bison when we originally put them out there. And we've seen some really good growth in the initial first several years of that transplant out there. And then we had a couple weather events of snow hindering the herd from being able to access, food. And so we lost about everything we gained at that point. But then we did have some herd growth again. And in 2022, we transplanted another 20-ish yearlings out there. And unfortunately, last year, we had another one of those snow conditions out there, and we nearly lost all those newly transplanted yearlings out there. And we have a current population of just probably south of 80 bison out there. The good takeaway news of that is through the years that they've been out there from 2015, 2023, is that they're able to recruit very fast. They have a really good productivity if they are able to get that late feed and not have those snow conditions or icing conditions out on the range. So right now that herd's very susceptible to snow conditions and icing for high productivity and herd growth out there. Then we went into late fall, early winter. We went into the Lower Tanana, which is basically the Mental Flats area. We had our second working group meeting there. It was a very diverse team again, and all these are. We try to invite everybody, communities, corporations, associations, anybody that has an interest in wood bison in their area. And the Fish and Game does a really good, they dedicate a lot of time trying to get everybody there, but there always seems to be somebody that's missed, and they feel a little upset about it. But that meeting was to start talking about a management plan and a release site for bison. And it's the second best area in the state for habitat-wise. It's very biologically a great area to put bison in. But there was there's a lot of discussion on should they be, in Mental Flats proper, right in the middle. Some of the local communities around there didn't really want them there. They weren't used to bison. They didn't want to see extra hunters in the area once the population may become populated. And so to shorten that story up a little bit, we did have a very good meeting with a lot of discussion and kind of ended up with potentially putting wood bison this year at the confluence of the Kantishna River and the Tanana. Seemed to be that it wasn't close to the rural communities out there. It's still got lots of great habitat, and it's a little more remote. So we do have another meeting coming up, like about the 20th of February to the 22nd, which we hope to finalize a management plan and have that brought to the Board of Game for the Interior meeting in March, so the department can start making them highly productive out there. And so the current management plan, because we get bison every other year from Canada, and so it'll be probably another 4 years potentially before we really start talking about putting bison in the Yukon Flats. Menta will be the main objective right now. We'll get some bison this spring, I believe, from Canada, and we have a few bison up at the Research Center in Fairbanks. And so I think the department will be focusing their finances and their effort on the Menta Flats release, and then work on the Yukon Flats in the future. So I think, and we'll have a much better update in the spring meeting or in Fairbanks with the area biologist and the assistant out there.
Well, thanks for that report, Al. Any questions from board members for Al? Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Member Barrett, what are they talking about as predation? They originally thought that was going to take 10 or 15 years for wolves to figure out how to kill bison. Are they actually doing it now, or any update on that?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you, Mr. Loring. There has been some predation in the lower Nokel. Mainly that was due to the snow conditions and the health of the bison. They were really depleted nutritionally, and the snows were deep, so there was some predation on it. But generally, predation doesn't exist or is very low, and we usually can look at herds like the Farewell herd and the Chittenden herd and Copper River herd, where there's very little to no predation. To this date, with even a blind fox gets a grouse every now and then, and that's basically what it is. And when you get talking about a herd animal like bison.
Any additional questions? These are magnificent animals. I have the opportunity to drive through the herd in British Columbia twice this year. They're all over the road and they're huge. So Al, do you want to continue on this? Is there anyone else who wants to take his place? If not, without objection, Al, Mr. Barrett, you can continue on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your work. And the Unit 19C Dall Sheep Committee and Working Group, I'm going to ask Jake to do the report on that.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jake Fletcher. I'm one of the 3 board members that are a part of this working group. Chairman Burnett and Vice Chair Hoffman are also on this working group. And first off, I want to say, I really appreciate all the public interest in this topic, and all the participation from the department. And we already heard about board support staff, how busy schedule they have, and we just put another big dollop of cornbread stuffing on a full plate for them. But basically, to cut right to the chase, we had a lot of applicants that wanted to be a part of this committee, and we've selected a committee, and it's very diverse group of folks, and we're in the very beginning stages of this. We had our kind of first meet and greet. During that meet and greet, we discussed a couple different topics, but predominantly, we've decided that everybody needs to go home from this and start thinking about a facilitator first and foremost, and also do put some thought into who they might want to see be invited for public testimony, but to cut right to the chase, it's at the very, very beginning stages here. And you know, I look forward to our next meeting.
Any questions from board members? We have the committee membership now is Jake, Stott, Shania, and is there any objection to that group, those three continuing? If not, then we'll leave it that way, leave the committee that way. And then we have a joint board committee, which did consist of Al, Jake, and Lynn last year. This committee doesn't meet very often, but I think it had one meeting last year. And Lynn's no longer with us, so we need a third member besides Lynn. If Al and Jake want to continue on that. Dave, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If nobody else is interested, I can take Lynn's position there.
Okay. I think that would be appropriate. Any objection to that? If not, our joint board committee will be Member Brett, Member Fletcher, and Member Lord. Next thing on our agenda is the 2024-2025 meeting dates and location for the Central Southwest Region and statewide regulation meetings. And so I'm going to turn this over to Christy and let her talk to the board about scheduling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to ask the board members to go to their RC1 meeting packet on their desk, and you can turn to pages 8 and 9. And as you said, the Board of Game meeting topics for next year are the statewide regulations meeting and the Central and Southwest Region meeting, which is Game Management Units 9, 10, 11, 13, 14A, 14B, 16, and 17. I have provided a set of options for you based on previous meeting duration, timing of the year, and those options are found on page 9. And then one thing I want to mention about these options is that we try to avoid overlap with the Board of Fisheries schedule, and I've provided those. I did provide those meeting dates for the Board of Fisheries, which is at the bottom of page 8. But regardless, the options on page 9 at the top avoid overlap with Board of Fishery meetings except for the March 14th through 21st, which overlaps 2 days with Board of Fish statewide shellfish meeting. If you find yourself that the other options don't work, that March 14th may be an option that you want to consider. So the options I provided you are for the duration of 8 days. Both meetings tend to be 8 days. However, actually, and when I look at the table at the bottom of page 9, so the last statewide regulations meeting, we scheduled for 9 days, actually, and the board adjourned earlier, so that was a 7-day duration. And then in November, the meeting prior to that one, it was 8 days. The year prior to that was 9 days. Kind of all depends, too, on the number of proposals we get, what that duration will be. But I think that for the board, that 8 days duration is probably safe to start with. And then once the proposal deadline has passed and we see the number of proposals that we have, we can probably adjust the meeting days if needed. Same with Central Southwest. So in 2022, you had a high number of proposals for that one at 119, and the board still adjourned 2 days earlier than scheduled for, so 7 days, but prior to that, it's often been 8 days long. And so also with regards to the schedule, the board has a practice of starting their regulatory meetings on a Friday. So these options have that Friday start date. There's a few other considerations listed on page 8 that the board is mindful of, such as taking in consideration of the needs of the Department of Fish and Game, such as survey data, collecting, conflicts with hunting seasons, things like that. We do need to keep the meetings at least 4 weeks apart from each other. And I think that's basically it on the considerations. The Board of Game has an annual agenda change request deadline of November 1 each year. So any that are accepted then are scheduled for either of those meetings. So that's why the board tends not to have any meetings in December but also it's, holiday season. But we need 30 days to provide the required regulatory notice for any regulation changes. So having a November 1 ACR deadline kind of throws out the month of December for regulatory meetings. And Mr. Chairman, I will stop there and see what questions there are and wait for your action.
Well, at this point, I wanted to make one comment on the timing of the length of the meetings in 2022. You may recall that 2022 at our Wasilla meeting, we had one member and at least one staff person who had COVID. There's probably reasons that are different if you look at any meetings in 2020, 21, or 22 for the timing and length that don't meet normal situations. So I'm hoping we don't have any COVID at this meeting. I haven't had it for months, not since our March meeting. Immediately after our March meeting, I had COVID. So just so you know, it does affect the lengths of meetings sometimes when you have a member that participates from his hotel room. Comments from, go ahead, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christie, for the statewide regulatory meeting, economically, is Fairbanks a better location than Anchorage?
Excellent question. I did not pull the budget estimates. I did not bring those handy, but I would say, I mean, I can double check. I'd probably say that for board support, Fairbanks is economically better because the meeting venues tend to be much less expensive. But what is more expensive for board support is flying members into Fairbanks. Anchorage can be more, well, it depends where the board members are located. If we're only getting them into Anchorage versus Fairbanks, and then the same for advisory committee members, and the same for board support staff. So Anchorage meeting venues tend to be really high, and so I would imagine that that's why I think Fairbanks is probably a little bit on the cheaper side with regards to that. And then, when there's expense for the department as a whole, the other agencies, and where they have to send staff to attend the meetings. And then one more point about the expenses for board meetings is the shipping of the equipment. So in addition, while we might have a cheaper venue in Fairbanks, we have to spend a couple $1,000s to get our equipment up to Fairbanks. So I would just add, but Anchorage or Fairbanks, either would be fine. Board support would have the budget to cover those locations.
Questions or comments from board members on dates or locations? I'd note on the Central Southwest that, we've met in Wasilla, met in Dillingham in 2018. Was there a specific reason we met that the board met in Dillingham, or was it just available?
My recollection was, there was interest from the board members to cover that other part of the region, and because let me see. Yeah, I don't know if the board had been out to Dillingham before, but it had been a long, long time ago if they had.
Okay. And are there any other population centers in that region besides Anchorage, Wasilla, Dillingham? What other population centers are there?
There is Palmer, but the problem with Palmer is
It's
there's.
Palmer.
We were not successful finding a large enough venue there. That was the challenge with Palmer. And possibly things have changed, but I know that, I'm not aware that there's a good-sized meeting venue out there.
Okay. Ryan first, and then,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess just for the board's consideration, I anticipate that meeting to be heavily attended, given the topics that will be presented there, specifically predator control issues and things like that.
okay, thank you. Stosh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A question to Christie regarding that meeting we had in Dillingham a few years ago. How, to me as a board member, it went very well. Thanks to you, because you made it work. But from your perspective, how was it? Because we kind of went out of our way to do that one. And cost-wise, and then just from what you do, from your standpoint, is it conducive to do something off the grid like that again?
Thank you, Member Hoffman. That's a good question. In Dillingham, we met at the high school, I think it was the high school, the high school gym. So we had the location, and it was really nice being in that location. It's challenging for board support just because there's a lot of work in these types of locations. Dillingham, I remember maybe having a little more help from the venue, but like the Armory here, it's nice to have this available for us, but it's a lot of work, like with the tables and equipment and finding everything we need. So Dillingham, it certainly was workable. Even the Board of Fisheries had met out there a couple years later. We could make it happen. It's just a matter of like shipping the equipment. As I recall in Dillingham also, one thing we were always mindful of too is like, would we have adequate internet? And at that Dillingham meeting, we did, but at that point we were streaming audio only. Here in Kotzebue, that's been a little bit of a challenge, and I believe we are streaming video. We weren't sure that was going to happen, but so I wouldn't anticipate that problem with Dillingham so much, although there have been a lot of instances with, I know from board support, I've heard it from our board support regional coordinator that I think they're using Starlink and they tend to get dropped a lot. So that's just one thing I'll mention. So I think, if that answers if you have other questions, specific questions about that.
Yeah, thank you, Christie. And the cost-wise, how did it fare compared to the others?
Again, we were able to fund it with our budget. We would be, again, it all kind of, depends on how many people how many advisory committee members go, shipping of equipment, but we will make it work within our budget.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also applaud board support. I was an AC member back in those days, and we went out to Dillingham, and it was a really good meeting. Met in the high school gym. There were several classes that got to come through there, got to see how the process works as far as the board of games. So it was very educational for the students that were there and anybody else that came there. And it was very enjoyable, and it was uncomplicated. I thought it ran real well.
Okay, thank you. I see a look on Ryan's face, but I don't see any questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just want to follow up, recognizing the board tries to get around the state, and that's admirable for sure, and it's good to have access to folks. It's expensive for us too, and places like, I love being in Kotzebue, and several years ago we were in Petersburg and some other places like that, but it is a cost to all the divisions and the staff that ends up out there. I guess I was going to throw out another option, and perhaps this isn't, I shouldn't do this, but how How about a statewide meeting in Juneau?
My only comment on that is question of hotel rooms, and, you know, I could probably accommodate 2 or 3 people at my house, but it's during the legislative session, and hotel rooms, I believe, are expensive and hard to come by. But it would be good to have a meeting when the legislature is there and give them, it would be kind of funny to give the legislature access to our meeting instead of giving more of the public access to our meeting. But I think the commissioner was very concerned last year about having the Southeast meeting in Juneau because of the problems with hotel rooms and getting in and out. Occasionally, I've heard that there's even problems flying in and out of there.
Just one more consideration, Mr. Chairman.
So Christie, someone needs to, I guess, throw out a time and date and place for, and I think we should go with the Central Southwest meeting first, because that's the January meeting. And that can either be the 10th through 17th or the 17th through 24th, is that correct?
That's correct.
And depending on which one of those is selected, well, I guess they all work, the other dates. So does anyone want to propose, would a board member please propose one of the dates and a location for the Central Southwest meeting? Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adopt a meeting for the for the Central Southwest Regional Meeting, January 10th date start. And I propose that location be Wasilla.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that it be in Wasilla, the Central and Southwest Region meeting be held in Wasilla, January 10th through 17th. And I would like if we could include in that a work session the day before, so that would be January 9th. So it would be actually the 9th through 17th when we'd be there, if that's acceptable to the maker of the motion.
Yes, the 9th would be appropriate.
Okay. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion for board members? Wasilla seems to be a good location for this. It's not any additional expense hardly from Anchorage, a little bit, but not much, and it's very convenient to most of the members. Maybe we'll get better weather than we got last time, and we won't have floods, but we don't need to call the roll on this, so we'll just, if there's no objection, that's when our next board meeting will be. Thank you, Member Brett. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, can you confirm it's January 9th through 17th of 2025
Yes,
in Wasilla?
and Wasilla.
Thank you.
Yeah, the meeting actually would be the 10th through the 17th, but the work session on the 9th. Okay. It's a deal. Now, for the statewide regulation meeting, last time we met in Fairbanks. Previously, we met in Anchorage. It's kind of been going back and forth between Fairbanks and Anchorage. I like Fairbanks because we get chocolate chip cookies.
Mr. Chair, you'll get those at Anchorage, too.
Yeah, but they're not quite the same because, I suppose I could just call Jay and ask him to send us some, chocolate chip cookies, but,
I thought you were talking about a member from the Matsu AC.
well, there's that, no, but the venue provided chocolate chip cookies and Jay's wisdom every morning to me, so. Central and Southeast, let's see, statewide. So Fairbanks or Anchorage and the dates. And Christie, how big of a problem is it overlapping?
My question that I had about where the Board of Fish was meeting, one of the things I was thinking about, if it's in the same location as Board of Fish, then it makes travel time be non-existent as far as trying to get from one meeting to the next. It would affect me and my staff, it would affect the Commissioner's office, and it would also affect George, I think, as well. And in looking at the dates, it would be a total of 3 days that it would overlap, which I think would be significant.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking for a member to to propose a date and location for the statewide meeting. Jake?
Could I make a proposal not to have it February 28th through March 7th?
Yeah? Well, what I would suggest is that you propose a different time, like maybe March 21st to 28th or something,
How about, I think those dates sound great, March 21st through 28th. But I'd also be interested to hear what other board members think about Juneau, the Juneau idea.
Okay.
I think it might be a unique opportunity.
Board members? Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm kind of not leaning towards the Juneau thing, but I'm on the fence. But I do like the comments that Dr. Whitna had made, that there'll be a lot of staff in Anchorage, and so there won't be a lot of, people having to fly back or get back. And I think that's fairly convenient for the department and probably would save some money for the department also. So I'd lean towards Anchorage right now.
Any addition? Go ahead, Stash.
I just agree with Member Barrett. I think Anchorage I'm leaning more towards Anchorage.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Doctor.
I would just clarify that if it's not overlapping with Board of Fish for us, we would have the budget to be able to get our staff to either location, and it wouldn't be a conflict with the overlap.
So you want to add a location to your?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. March 21st through 28th in Anchorage.
Okay,
Second.
so that's been moved and seconded. Are there any objections to holding our statewide meeting in Anchorage, March 21st to 28th? And that doesn't have a work session at the beginning of it, so it's just those dates. If there's no objection, that's when we'll have our meeting. We'll put it on the schedule. Thank you. The call for proposals for this, and there is something in our, so Christie, would you like to talk about this, what the Board of Fish has done?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So in your meeting packet, I'm just going to point out a couple other things. So the draft call for proposals for the Board of Game is shown on page 11 and 12, and it's pretty typical. We follow the 11, 12, 13, through 14. We follow the kind of the same process, same regulations. I confirm that I have everything correct too, with also Natalie Weber and Cheryl Brooking. So we'll review that one more time once I update it with the new meeting dates and whatnot. So that's there for your information. Then starting on page 15 is the Board of Fisheries call for proposals, and followed by their proposal form. Why I'm bringing this to your attention is that at the Board of Fish October work session, they decided to include an additional question on the proposal form and in their call for proposals. So I'm do this backwards, but looking on page 17, question number 4, they added, did you develop your proposal in coordination with others or with your local Fish and Game Advisory Committee? Please explain. And then on the call for proposals, they included a blurb found on page 16 that speaks to also about, I think it's the second paragraph. The board encourages individuals or organizations to communicate and coordinate with others in the development of proposals. Local advisory committees are an excellent resource, and the collective knowledge and experience within ACs may help improve proposals, increasing their chances of success. And then they provide a link for the advisory committees. So that may be, over the years, the proposal forms for both boards have been consistent. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, I suppose, but I wanted to bring that again to your attention and see if you would also like to incorporate that question and information.
Board members, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, I read that prior to coming here, and there was the assumption that, or the perceived assumption that it would increase the success of somebody's getting their proposal passed, with some experience with advisory committees. I don't know how much that's true. I think old ACs, like a lot of other petitioners, don't have a super great track record of getting things passed. Though I always encourage people to participate with the ACs. I think they're a wealth of knowledge, and they're able to help format and write things that do work better and have less errors in it for board support to fix, such as citations and if it's statutory or regulatory even. So I always encourage it. I don't know if this would, having this question on there would have board members look at things differently. Just something, one of the things somebody might look and say, well, they didn't even go through an AC, or a non-resident might not have access to an AC. And so they would have to mark no, and somebody might take that as, not participating as well. So just some thoughts.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the past, I've authored many proposals to the Board of Game, and I've never actually talked to the AC prior to developing them, because there's usually something internal that caused the thing to happen to begin with. But I've always gone to the AC, especially the larger ACs, with my proposal, explained to them what it was about and asked for their support. And most of the time I've gotten that support, and then when that AC then would support at the Board of Game meeting. As far as, I have to echo what Al's saying about whether or not that it's an important part of this form, I'm not sure it would make any difference to me, but I would definitely suggest to proposal, people that author proposals, to visit their ACs and explain to them what it's about and get that support. Thank you.
Any additional discussion from board members? It probably is good to have, in some ways, to have consistency between the Board of Fish and the Board of Game. The Board of Fish has already adopted this language, and the question is whether we would adopt this also. I'd like someone to make a motion as to whether or not we should adopt it, just for clarification here. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Game adopt the language that's shown on page 17, number 4, to include the develop your proposal in coordination with others or with your local Fish and Game Advisory Committee, to stay consistent with the Board of Fish proposal packet here that we have in front of us.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll intend to support this proposal or this motion. I'm just wondering, is it a procedural thing that the Board of Fish comes up with something they want to change on an application versus coming, negotiating? We have a joint board a group, and not to have a meeting and say, here's what we're kind of looking at. Do you guys want to go along with it? Instead of showing up at a meeting, say, here's what we passed. You guys want to stay consistent with us?
Right. No, I think.
That's my concern.
I think this is certainly a discussion to have with the Board of Fish at our joint board meeting, which we're going to have here this year. And also the committee, because it is, procedurally, we could adopt something and then suggest that they adopt it too, I don't know that they would prefer that. Talking between boards is probably a better process, but having said that, they've done this. Is there objection to the motion on the table?
Call the question.
I think this doesn't need a roll call vote unless you want one. I think we can adopt it without objection.
If there's no objection.
Yeah, so, okay, so we will include that on our proposal forms. The next item on the agenda is to talk about board of game policies and findings, specifically a proposed policy on the use of motions to rescind. And there's a draft motion to rescind policy. And again, this was not, I believe the Board of Fish has a similar policy in place, but this was not brought to us because of the Board of Fish. This was brought to us because of our, brought forward as a possible policy change due to having a couple of special meetings last year, which I think were a bit confusing for the public. And so, more people, have you all read this? If not, let's take a couple of minutes. I'll give us a couple of minute break to read the policy before we discuss it.
Mr. Chair,
Go
if I
ahead.
may, and I would bring to the board members' attention paragraph 2, which has had some tweaks from the prior draft that you had seen prior to the meeting.
Okay, we'll just stand down for a couple of minutes here, and then we'll come back on the record. Has everyone had a chance to read this? I think we can come back on the record now. And what I'd like is to have a motion to adopt this policy, if I could have one. Al?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to adopt RC 002, which is the operating procedures policy, not use motion to rescind.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'd like to quickly talk about this. Robert's Rules of Order allows for a motion on a procedure, or a motion on a proposal, and if it passes or fails, we can reconsider that vote. If it passes, you can reconsider it, and any member can bring up a rescinding action at any time in the future. What this policy would do, essentially, is to limit the use of rescinding motion to the meeting at which a proposal was first brought before the board and passed, instead of allowing it to happen at a subsequent meeting. And the reason that I think this is important, I think the commissioner has mentioned that he would like for us to have this type of a policy, is that the public who is there at the meeting isn't necessarily going to be there at the special meeting later. It just makes for a better public process. It does not eliminate the ability to rescind an action that we take at the beginning of a meeting toward the end of the meeting. We just have to make sure that we think things through during the meeting we're at and make final decisions rather than trying to make decisions later. And this is a policy, it's not going to be a regulation, so it isn't totally binding on future boards, but it is what is expected of people. And so, you know, you can always eliminate this policy, you can overturn this policy, and you can, with a sufficient vote, you can ignore a policy. But it tells the public that we're not going to have, you're not going to pass a regulation and then the next meeting, when that regulation is, even though it has been publicly noticed that you're going to rescind it, you're not going to eliminate a previously passed regulation outside of the meeting at which it was passed. So, discussion from board members. Al?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I intend to support this, but I do have a question. In the past, it used to be a person that would ask for reconsideration had to be one of the parties that was in the prevailing vote. Now it's any board member.
No, if I could correct, just to be clear, Robert's Rules of Order requires, and which is what we operate on loosely, requires that it be one of the prevailing members. A rescinding action can be brought by any member.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And both of them require a two-thirds vote to pass. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, so with that, I fully intend to support this. I think holding it to a meeting is very wise, and I think, I don't know why that hasn't been like that, but
But
I support that.
Because, if we were an ongoing body like a city assembly that meets weekly or something, then it makes sense to be able to rescind your action at the next meeting. But a thing that does regional meetings, meets on a 3-year cycle, you need to conclude business at that meeting, I believe. Go ahead, Stosh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in agreement with Member Brett. In fact, I thought that was the way it was anyway. So I intend to support this, but question is, and not that it really matters, but has the Board of Fish adopted this as well?
If I could, the Board of Fish has a policy very similar to this, that they adopted several years ago after a very contentious time. Go ahead, Jake.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just so I kind of fully understand the ramifications of this. So I know that we have the ability as a board, if several board members get together, you can call a special meeting. Yes. Would that affect the ability for several board members to get together to call a special meeting to address a specific topic?
If we were to follow this policy, if we adopt this policy and it's followed, 2 board members could call a special meeting in the future. However, rather than rescinding an action that they'd taken, they could propose a board-generated proposal, for example, and have another special meeting with sufficient public notice to deal with that, instead of going back and voiding the action from the prior meeting. They would have to do a new positive action in order to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that clarification, I'm going to support this as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I understand, with the motion to reconsider, or reconsideration, there's discussion about that, and then there's another vote to reconsider it. On this motion to rescind, is it just a 2/3 vote and we're done? Or we even talk about what's going on? Or is it just, cut and dried over and done?
Okay, a motion to consideration, for reconsideration can bring a proposal back for new discussion, new action. A motion to rescind simply gets rid of what you did before. It is a debatable motion, so you can have discussion prior to the vote, but once it's done, it does not bring that proposal back, and you can't make other additional modifications to it, so you have to start over. Okay.
Okay, that explains that. Thank you. I'll be supporting this, and I really like the idea of making sure that the public is involved with that motion to rescind in that same meeting. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, so go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a question about Board of Fish. They don't have a policy on motion to rescind, but they do have a policy on motion to reconsider, and they have restricted their members' ability to reconsider. There has to be notice, and it has to be within 24 hours. Otherwise, there can no longer be a motion to reconsider, even during that same meeting. The Board of Game has not done that, but that is one difference between the boards. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Cheryl. Go ahead, Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I'm going to contradict Ms. Brooking. I'm sorry. I didn't make this known, but they did, in 2013, they did do a policy for rescinding, and I did include it in the packet, and I should have mentioned that before, on page 6. So they do have that policy to not use motion to rescind.
Yeah, I thought that was correct also. Yeah, so, okay. So we've kind of beaten this horse a little bit, and any other further discussion on this? If not, would we like to have a vote on it, or would you, it's a procedural, it's a procedure. We
Ask
could-
for unanimous consent.
We'll ask for unanimous consent. I'm hearing no objection. It will be adopted. Thank you. And next, under other business. What do we have under other business?
I'm aware of one item, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to bring to the board's attention, on page 20 of your packet is a letter from the East Prince of Wales Fish and Game Advisory Committee to the Joint Boards of Fisheries and Game, respectfully requesting to change the regulations so that they have 2 designated seats for 5 of the communities on Prince of Wales Island. That would give them a total of 10 designated seats. The remaining 5 will remain undesignated. I could quickly pull up their seat designation now. I intended to do that before this, so I apologize for that. But I believe they only have like 2 or 4 designated seats currently, and the remainder are undesignated. And so they're asking just to make it a little more equal for those communities, that they have some more specific seat designations. So the East Prince of Wales Island AC met in early January and decided to send this letter to the joint board, even though they had missed the call for proposals. They know that the joint board meeting is coming up. However, the joint board meets to consider advisory committee regulations every 5 years. So this was an opportunity they thought they would try. The joint board doesn't have an agenda change request policy, so we advised them to just please send a letter to the joint boards. This was on the Board of Fish the Board of Fish miscellaneous business agenda at their recent meeting in Kodiak in January, and the Board of Fish did approve with their request to go forward with scheduling this for the joint board meeting. I believe that that's all it takes to get this on the agenda for the joint board. I'll look to Cheryl for confirmation on that, but that's my understanding. So I don't know that any action, based on that, I don't know that this board has to do anything on that, although you still might want to, and just leave it to you for discussion, Mr. Chair.
Cheryl, did you have any comment on that?
Yeah, you said the Board of Fish did adopt that. So, yeah, you can weigh in on it, have a discussion, but it's not already happened because the timing of the meetings.
So essentially what the Board of Fish has done is similar to doing a board-generated proposal on behalf of the advisory committee here by agreeing to hear that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's a good way of looking at it, yeah.
So I don't know that we need to, I mean, we're aware of it, but I think if either board were to bring a proposal forward to the joint board meeting, I think we would hear it and legitimately. It'll have public notice, so it should be okay.
Yes, and just on that topic, is the legal notice for the joint board meeting has not gone out, but it will have, in early February. And because it hasn't gone out, we'll send it out and we can add the notification of this added proposal. Once that notice goes out, then, you know, if other requests came forward, then that is an issue, that whether we could properly notice other requests.
Right, that would be my concern, that it be properly noticed, and as long as it's going to be properly noticed, I think it's okay. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I intend to fully support this. I do maybe have some concern in the future that we're setting a precedent that, somebody or AC in this case, missed a deadline for call for proposals. And with, keeping in mind the open, the 30-day notice, could petition either board or both boards to add something because there's not an ACR process. And with passing of this or allowing this, are we going to deny the next group that wants, I'm for ACs, don't get me wrong, and I'll support this, but it may be something we'd have to consider in the future so it doesn't, get out of our hands.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it is potentially a precedent, but I also understand that in some of these rural ACs, it's very difficult to get a quorum and membership and meet and do something on a deadline. So it's possible that what we need to do is when we set a proposal deadline for ACs for something that is not a game-related, specifically a game-related hunting season, means, methods, bag limit, that we have some kind of a different deadline or notice for AC's proposals. And that's for future consideration, but, yeah, it isn't good to say, yeah, it's okay to just miss a deadline and not do it. Bad public process. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support Al's comments on, possibly setting a precedent, but in this case, since it's a joint board meeting, which doesn't meet that often, and there's no agenda change request process that Chrissy talked about, that we should maybe look a little bit closely at allowing this to happen. I support it because if it was a regular board meeting, that every 2 years happens again, then maybe not. But in this case, I do support it. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're not going to take action on this because the Board of Fish has already moved it forward. So it's more informational in a lot of ways, but it's good to hear people's thoughts on it. Any other thoughts? If not, go ahead, Al.
Yeah, just because we have so few joint board meetings, do we have on the agenda for the joint boards, is there a miscellaneous section or to where we may discuss that as a joint board on maybe a policy or, something that would put some sideboards on this?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on our agenda? Go ahead, Christie.
There is.
Under
and,
other business.
It's really been a really busy, crazy last week or two, and I did have one other item related to the call for proposals that I now just remembered, so I have to take you back to that. I apologize. I wanted to mention to the board that for the state, that the board's agenda change request policy is a statewide regulation that is on the call for proposals. And at the last agenda change request meeting, there was discussion about modifying, or, I think, and maybe not so much modifying, but the agenda change request policy dealing with emergency situations that might not meet the criteria that's in your policy, different types of situations. So this would be once this call is open, this is the opportunity for the board to put forward a proposal to change their agenda change request policy if you felt that was needed. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and that's something you could talk about at a later meeting, too.
And that could come up at the end of our regular meeting under miscellaneous other business. So if someone were interested in doing that, and that came up as a result of our discussion about a proposed muskox regulation, which has some other issues, but we will, so if anybody wants to bring that up at that time, at the end of on the last day of this meeting, that'd be great. Any additional things on other business? If not, I think we can adjourn the work session if someone wants to make such a motion.
I move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have a
And I
second?
second that.
Moved and seconded, without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you. But before we leave, there's an additional orientation part, and I'm not sure when we're going to do that, but I'm going to leave that to staff.
Yeah, since it's close to the lunch hour, I hate to keep folks from their lunch hour, but it's convenient that we will probably just do that orientation session here and just get it over with and then eat. But if folks are really hungry and want to get out of here, we could return here around maybe 2 o'clock.
How long do you think it'll take?
I don't expect it to take more than an hour. I would hope for like 45 minutes.
So can people put their lunch off for an hour? Do we need a little break first?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a break and then go back to orientation. Thanks.